So we've got some people on Crowdcast. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. And this is being recorded for future reference. So we're here today to talk about, it's the first week of our flexible animal-based omnivore. And those of us that did this last year, it was a game changer. Like, it was awesome. And it's actually our default. We will always advocate through the SHT a balanced way of eating, especially initially. But I can tell you right now, my argument today is to make an argument for the power of animal meats and fats and to make those priority in the diet. If you do that, you're going to feel amazing. Oh, that's fine, because the presentation's on there, right? Yeah. All right. So, but again, I do want to just say we're veterans here. I think most of us have kind of been SHT-ish for a little bit. I will always advocate balance, plants and stuff, but it was a game changer when we did it last year. And if you haven't heard about our big purpose, I mean, what we're trying to do through the SHT is really just bring together people who for most of their lives have been confused and lost when it comes to food and health because they're looking for clarity and confidence. And so what we do is educate people on these health topics, facilitate experiments, and then we support each other through our community. Everything good?
You can't see it.
You can't see the presentation? Let me see. Thank you. 1 second, y'all. All right, what's up, y'all? We're fixing this. Here we go. All right, now how about that? Yeah? Better?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So anyway, what we do is we learn health concepts together, put them into practice, and then we support each other, and we end up having just amazing people that look and feel and perform amazing. So the way that we've kind of put this together going forward is that we always have a monthly theme. So this month's theme is flexible animal-based omnivore. Next month we're covering grounding, hiking, camping, outdoors 101, and then the next month we're actually going to talk about how to be a vegan, smart vegan. And we've actually got a couple of vegans in the gym right now that have been through this little protocol and they love it. I don't know how many of us will actually commit to that for a very long time because we're going to be so addicted to meat after this thing. And then within those monthly themes, we're having these weekly seminars. So I've had a weekly seminar ever since we put this into practice. I'm going to have a break at some point, but I'm really enjoying the weekly topics. If you're in our little community, then we have daily questions and polls and things that are really awesome. So if y'all are not a part of the community yet, just let me know. You get the cheapest discount that we offer. It's really fun and awesome. And I got to get you in there. You're going to help me with that, right? Yeah, so the community is great. Now, like most of you, for the past 10 years, I have been trying to experiment within our realm of real food to see what works best, right? Maybe you haven't been doing it 10 years, but like most of us have been tinkering around with real food to the best of our abilities for a little bit. I don't know if you remember from this last year's master class, what we consider necessary to master real food over a lifetime is number one, you just learn the basics. Number two, you transition away from the Siete chips and the Strauss ice creams. Y'all have any of that in the house still? Good job. All right. Surprise inspection is coming.
That's a guilty look on your face.
I know.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
We just
bought a bunch of chips. My wife and son want chips.
Yeah. Well,
there's not any Siete. I think there's regular potato chips.
Yeah. Oh, like Lay's or something like that?
I think they're Himalayan. I don't know what kind they are.
Well, the goal is to move away from that stuff as much as possible. Right? Just be a real foodie. I remember that was a real game changer for me and Colby. We said, hey, for shits and giggles, let's just try to eat real food, like none of the approved stuff. And that's when things really started to shift.
It makes a huge difference.
Huge difference, yeah. So, and then within that, being a real foodie, you always want to experiment with low carb. And I'll tell you right now that most of us that have any issues within the real food realm, it's a carbohydrate thing or an improved foods thing, right? As soon as I go low carb, as soon as most of my clients go low carb, if they really do it, if they're honest with themselves, that's when things really start to shift, right? And then we recommend, again, we're talking about mastering real food for life, always doing low carb here and there, and then always going without something and testing yourself for it. So that's what we're doing with this whole carnivore or flexible animal-based omnivores. We're taking out plants and we're going to see how we feel, reintroduce them, and then see how they affect us when we reintroduce them. Now, when I first heard about the carnivore, this is about 2 years ago, I think these are two of the prominent figures right now, Sean Baker and Paul Saladino. I had heard carnivore through Chris Kresser, Sarah Ballantyne. I think Rob Wolf had brought it up, and it sounded crazy. What did you think about it when you first heard about it?
Oh, it makes sense.
To me, it was like, I was like, there's no way. Like, I'm a huge meat advocate, but I was like, carnivore, like 100% no plants.
Seems like a lot.
Yeah, it went against even what I thought was right. And then when you start to dig into it, it makes a lot of sense. Like, it makes so much sense. And that's the argument that I want to try to facilitate today, right? So, just to do a refresher on our food basics, what are we trying to do big picture? We're trying to eat real food. We got to be strategic with our carbohydrates, and we have to nurture space in between meals and periods of not eating, right? That's the basics. Where does energy come from? Pop quiz. Where do we get energy from? There's two main sources. Fat and carbohydrates, all right? So fat is dietary fat from plant-based fat, animal fats, and then also we got some body fat, right? And then carbohydrates to us, carbohydrates to us are our starchy and sugary stuff, all right? Even though some people would call broccoli carbohydrates, right? Something very important to always remember, carbs are the opposite of fat. So if I'm trying to get my body to use my body fat for fuel, then when I eat carbs, I'm not doing that. And I just need to be aware of it. We're not saying don't eat carbs, we're just saying be strategic about it. Now, why do we have body fat? What's the evolutionary purpose of body fat? Ben, take a guess. Why do we have
the
fat?
evolutionary purpose, I would say, is for storage, or like in case you don't have food, you can have some source of fuel.
That's it. That's it. So the purpose of body fat is stored energy for when we're not eating. Therefore, to get the body to use body fat for fuel, what do we have to do? You have to not eat. If that's stored energy for not eating, then we have to go through periods of not eating. So that's how we come up with our basic rules, right? No carbs first part of the day, no snacking between meals, have some carbs later in the day from real food sources, right? That's the template for life.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Could you switch that around and have carbs first part of the day and never again?
Well,
After
you can do an experiment and see how you feel with it. Most people, if we switch this, they don't feel as good because that carb in the morning, it's like it starts this cycle of wanting more and more snacking and more food because you have this kind of a spike and crash. But you can try, like you can experiment. I'd say if you stay in the real food realm, there's nothing wrong with doing your own experiments for sure. All right, so get rid of this little thing right here. Why this progression? Because we're trying to optimize things. Damn it, what the hell? Am I still sharing, Arca? Is it on the phone too? All right, cool. All right, so the reason we want to try this progression is if we have stubborn digestive issues, if we have skin issues, autoimmune conditions, and we just want to experiment to see what works best for us, right? That's why we're doing this. The theory is that problematic compounds in plants may be responsible for some or all of our symptoms. All right, so let's talk about the dramatic increase in brain size of human beings. Do we know about this yet? So this is my best shot at trying to show you we have this exponential increase in brain size. So something happened around this time period that facilitated a bigger brain size in human beings. All right, so this is about 2.5 million years ago, 2 million years ago. And then you see here we have the introduction of fire and the control of fire around 1 million years ago. All right, so we had a dramatic increase in brain size that led up to about 40,000 years ago. And at about 40,000 years ago, everything started to reverse. So we've had a decrease in brain size and a decrease in stature. Did we know about this? Cool. All right, so we've shrunk. Since agriculture, we have shrunk. So first thing I want to cover is the expensive tissue hypothesis. So there's a couple of scientists in Japan that hypothesize. So what we found is that all primates expend the same metabolic energy. Doesn't matter how big they are. What we found is that inside, the body uses energy in different ways. The brain takes up a lot of energy. The digestive system takes up a lot of energy. So when a primate has a larger brain, the theory was that their digestive system had to shrink. And that's what they found. So the larger the brain, the smaller the gut. So something had to compromise. So the bigger an animal's brain gets, without the animal being able to grow anymore, the smaller the digestive system gets. And that's exactly what we find. So here we see a chimpanzee with a pretty big, large digestive system. Australopithecus, right? So that's that transitional period where we started to see an increase in brain size, and then we have the modern human with a smaller digestive system. All right, so I'm really proud of this graphic. I put it together myself. So starting back here, around 2.5 million years, we see the first evidence of human beings being scavengers. And this is not a theory or up for debate. This is pretty common consensus in the anthropological evolutionary realm. So about 2.5 million years ago is when we see evidence of humans being scavengers. And then about 2 million years ago is when we see evidence of humans transitioning into actual hunters, and humans eating all organs of the body, cracking into marrow and stuff like that. And then about 1 million years ago is when we received the introduction of fire. And then we hit our max brain size around 60,000 years ago, and then we started to shrink. So the question was, what was it that caused us to have that bigger brain size? So we have what we call delta-15 nitrogen isotopes. All right, so this is pulled out of a couple of books that I've read recently, Sean Baker's Carnivore Diet, Paul Saldina's Carnivore Code. And so basically we have a way to measure from fossils and bones where an animal falls on the spectrum of herbivore to carnivore. All right, so what we see with the delta-15 nitrogen isotopes in herbivores, they have a lower number, 3 to 7%. In carnivores, which are obligate carnivores, that's all they eat, we see higher numbers, so 6 to 12%. And then when we analyze Neanderthals, which was about 50, 60,000 years ago, 12%. And then when we analyze Homo sapiens before that 50,000 years ago transition, we were at 13.5%. So again, the consensus is that meat is what actually facilitated our larger brain size, because we were getting more nutrients, we were getting more calories, more calorically dense foods, and we became top-level predators. All right, so then the question is, why did we ever switch? So let's talk. I'm still trying to make an argument for eating meat, all right? How our digestive system is geared. You got any questions? Let me know. Okay. All right, so one thing that I hear a lot from clients, and again, I'm always preaching balance with the SHT, and then I help facilitate experience, right? One thing I always hear from clients is that, wait, we're all different, right? We're all made different, therefore maybe we all should eat different things. Well, we're all different, unique individuals, but we are all part of the same species, and that is Homo sapiens, okay? So the definition of a species is that you share identical physiology, biology, although we are all individuals. All right, so all rabbits eat the same thing, even though every rabbit is an individual, right? All lions are going to eat the same thing, even though every lion is an individual. All zebras are going to eat the same thing. And then go ahead, shoot.
All right. So why wouldn't a lion's brain get a lot bigger too if all he eats is meat?
Well, they follow different evolutionary paths. So I was thinking about that too, right? Because there are some primates right now that still eat meat or carnivores. But I don't know, selective pressures, you have these little branches, these tree branches that diverge off, and they just become experts in some way that's different. I don't know. It's really weird. Yeah, I don't understand how that happens. So Kyle mentioned, well, if cats and lions are eating nothing but meat, they should have gotten bigger brains too. So I don't know. I don't know how that works. But anyway, so human beings, Homo sapiens, the species, all share identical digestive systems. So then the big question is, what are we supposed to eat as an animal, right? If we look at a lion, we know what a lion eats, we know what a cow eats. What is a human being supposed to eat? So you have this whole circle of life, right? You have sunlight, which gives energy to plants, and through photosynthesis, they create themselves. We have herbivores that can actually eat the plants and convert that into some kind of an energy, actually short-chain fatty acids and some other nutrients. Then you have the consumers, like the omnivores and the carnivores, that consume everything else and get some kind of benefit out of that, right? Omnivores are able to consume plants and other animals. So the question is, where do we fall on that system? So a couple of years ago, I started making this argument about, I'm sure you've heard me say, like, I want to eat something that resembles meat. So if I'm this and I eat this, something that looks like this, hopefully not human beings, but something that looks like this, then I will give my body what I need to make this. And then one of my clients said, yeah, but cows don't eat meat and they are meat. And I was like, dang, that's a really good argument. So now we have to understand, what is our digestive system here for? Right? So these all have different digestive systems. So compared to other primates, you have in the primate world the full spectrum of herbivore or just plant eaters all the way up to complete carnivores, which is the tarsier. Is that how you say that? Y'all know? Didn't it come from Tanzania?
I mean, yes, but they don't say it like that.
Okay.
They say it in Swahili, so I don't know.
Oh, all right. All right. So, and then chimps eat meat sometimes.
Bush babies.
What's that?
They say bush babies.
Bush babies. Okay. So chimps eat meat sometimes, and then we have the full carnivore. But anyway, within that spectrum, we have a lot of different ways that animals eat. Now, what's different about human beings compared to other primates is our digestive system. So here we see human beings have an extremely large small intestine compared to other primates, and other primates have huge colons. Where fermentation happens for plant matter is in the cecum and in the colon. So we have a very, very small colon, right? So human beings is this little kind of diagonal line here. We have a very large small intestine. The small intestine is where animals absorb nutrients. Okay? So herbivores can take nutrient-deplete plant matter, and through the fermentation process, through hindgut fermentation, foregut fermentation, or through a multi-chamber stomach like a cow has, they can take nutrient-deplete plant matter and convert it into short-chain fatty acids. So when you look at what a cow eats a lot of grass and a lot of herbs, but the cow actually converts that grass and herbs into short-chain fatty acids, and actually the cow becomes a high-fat eater because those fats get converted into structure, and then the cow can actually use that fat for energy. Right?
What's a short chain fatty acid?
It's just a type of fatty acid. A lot of it's used for structure in the body, and it's easy to use for energy too. Yeah. And there's a lot of different varieties within short-chain fatty acids, and then there's other nutrients they make. But the bottom line here is that herbivores can take what we would consider to be nutrient deplete, like without nutrients, and then through fermentation convert it into something that's very useful. But we don't have that capacity. That's the difference, right? We've lost that because we've had our gut shrink over time, bigger brains, and so we've had to gear ourselves for something different. So again, just going back over the whole expensive tissue hypothesis, we have a bigger brain, smaller gut, so we had to compromise somewhere. So let's talk about human digestion real quick, because this is really useful to know. Human digestion should start by thinking about food, preparing food, seeing and smelling food, and then you chew it, and then it goes into the stomach, and then it gets absorbed in the small intestine, and some water and some waste stuff gets absorbed in the colon and large intestine. All right, so this is how we should be doing things. You prepare food, you start to activate all kinds of different digestive processes. Right? So as I think about, see, and smell food, then I have salivary amylase secreted in my mouth that helps me digest carbohydrates. And then if I chew my food really well, which we should be doing, then that bolus goes into the stomach, moves through the cardiac sphincter. And in the stomach, we have an extremely high amount of hydrochloric acid secreted into the stomach. Right? The reason that we have that is because we need a strong acidic environment to activate this protein digesting enzyme called pepsin. So pepsin is something that proves we're designed to eat meat and to eat proteins, because in the presence of really strong hydrochloric acid or strong acidity, pepsin is activated. Now what's also cool is the stomach actually protects itself by secreting a mucosa, so it doesn't digest itself, but it needs that really strong hydrochloric acid or acidity level to actually activate pepsin. So on a pH scale, if you're not familiar with it, the lower the number, the higher the acidity. So usually human beings have a stomach acid secreted into the stomach upon like thinking about smelling and seeing food at 0.8, which is almost pure acid, right? So that's like, if you took that and poured it on the floor, it'd be like aliens eating through the floor, right? So very, very strong acidity. The acidity of the stomach is also an indication of what an animal eats. So herbivores usually have a much higher pH or low acidity, right? They're usually somewhere up in the 5 to 6 to 7 range. And then carnivores are usually down in that lower acidity or higher acidity, lower pH, right? But we need that strong acidity to activate pepsin. And if we're doing things right, then we should have a really strong acidic environment in the stomach, right? So the reason we want that strong acidity is it bathes the stomach, it disinfects the stomach, it helps us digest pathogens before they can do any harm to us. And then of course it activates pepsin, which helps us break down proteins. So the reason I'm bringing this up is this is what makes our digestive system different from other primates. We have a very strong acidity in the upper GI. We do not have a large colon that does fermentation. We kind of evolved away from that, all right? Questions or comments at this point? Is it making sense or is it too much?
Can you see what pepsin is?
It's a protein digesting enzyme. So as I eat food, my body is aware of that, and it starts to secrete hydrochloric acid into the stomach to get it really hot, and then it secretes pepsin, and pepsin is only activated by very low pH or high acidity. So it's a protein digesting enzyme. So, all right. So, and then just to touch on the cooking aspect, the control of fire came in about 1 million years ago. And so that's really when we saw that exponential curve increase as far as our brain size goes. So most anthropologists believe that it was the convergence of eating animal meats and fats, eating organs, animals nose to tail, and the control and use of fire, which allowed us to eat foods even more because cooking food pre-digests it. Most anthropologists believe that it was those two things that actually led to the increase in our brain size over time. Right? Does that make sense? Am I making a decent argument for it? Okay. All right. So again, transition from scavengers. We started eating meat about 2.5 million years ago. About 2 million years ago, there's evidence of us having stone tools and arrows and things that we were killing animals with. And then about 1 million years ago is when we introduced fire. 50,000 years ago is when we started to have that little bit of a decline. Right? One of the biggest theories right now, why did we transition away from meat if that was what we were evolving to do? So Paul Saladino brings it up, I think, in a lot of his podcasts, where we pretty much killed off all the megafauna, like the woolly mammoths and the huge animals that we were actually eating. And so once that happened, we settled in these different populations on the planet, and we had to make do with what we had. So we learned to invent and create agriculture, plant seeds, and grow things. And so that's where our flexibility kind of comes in. We have the ability to eat other foods, but we were starting to learn how to thrive on animal meats and fats. So to summarize, the key of our digestive system, we do really good on nutrient and caloric density with maximum absorption because we have that really large small intestine and small large intestine. We do not have the capacity to ferment in the way that herbivores and other fermenters do. That doesn't mean that we can't eat plants. We just don't get the same benefit out of plants as herbivores do because we don't have the capacity to change that nutrient deplete plant matter into something else that's useful. We get something out of it, but it's not as beneficial as an herbivore. Right? We do really well on direct nutrient to nutrient assimilation, which means if you go to the doctor and you have low magnesium levels, what does he tell you to do? Take magnesium. If you have low vitamin A or vitamin D, he tells you to take vitamin A or vitamin D. We do really well, and this is really well known in the medical community, on direct nutrient to nutrient assimilation. If I need something, I need to eat that something, right? That's how our digestive system is geared. We also do really well in direct energy assimilation, meaning that if I want to use fat for fuel, then I need to eat fat for fuel. If I want to use carbohydrates for fuel, then I need to be eating starches and sugars. So again, I can't take grass or leaves or spinach and ferment it and turn it into short-chain fatty acids. So we do really well on direct nutrient to nutrient and energy to energy assimilation. All right. And then we do really well on cooked foods. Have you ever tried to eat a completely raw steak? It's almost impossible. You have to chew it forever. Yeah. Yeah.
You
So
tried it, right?
yeah.
Well, you tried everything.
Oh yeah. So we were at Echo and Rig one time, and we ordered Cat Henry ordered a tomahawk steak, and she got it blue. Blue, the term for like pretty much rare raw. And I mean, seriously, we were sitting there on a piece for like 30 minutes trying to chew that thing down. So we do really well in cooked foods. Right? I think cooking. I think you benefit from cooking almost all your foods. I'm not a big fan of raw food at all. All right.
Sushi?
But we do some tartar.
Yeah, I mean, if you can make it soft and digestible,
We'll
that's
chop
great.
it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's why people put like the acid in it. The same with, like,
Ceviche.
That's right, ceviche and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The softer the food, the more that you don't have to cook it. It's almost intuitive. When you study anthropology, you see a lot of hunter-gatherers are out and about, like gathering foods. So the soft foods, like oysters, some shellfish and things like that, they'll eat raw, and then ferns and greens. But then anything else that's hardy, including meats, they'll cook. So
Thin sliced beef. Let it this bottom round, sliced real thin. Always have it on it.
cool. Yeah, almost like a
Take a
tartar.
hunk of it.
Almost like a tartar, right? Tartar is when they scrape it. Isn't that tartar? Meat tartar, right?
Yeah, you can just take a steak and chop it up.
Yeah.
It's just raw
But
steak.
you don't want to use like a hard steak. You use like
Yeah,
The
use a lot more
softer.
time.
But if you scrape it enough, I mean, you can turn it into mush.
Right.
All right. So, any questions on these key points right here?
Wait, can you, what
Does
is
anybody?
the-
Go
What's the
ahead.
nutrient to nutrient? Again?
Nutrient to nutrient means that as human beings, we do best on. If I need vitamin A, I need to eat vitamin A.
Okay.
If I need muscle, I need to eat muscle. If I need collagen, I need to eat collagen. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
We're not like turning. Yeah, we're not turning one thing into another.
We're not very good at converting at
Yeah.
all. All right. So, and there's so many different examples. A lot of people would say when you eat carrots, you get vitamin A. Have you ever heard that before?
Yeah.
So, but there's no vitamin A in carrots. There's beta carotene, which can get converted into vitamin A. But humans don't do that very efficiently at all. Like it's estimated maybe about 3 to 7% get converted into vitamin A. But if we eat retinol or vitamin A from animal sources, direct nutrient to nutrient assimilation, we do really well. So, and there's a bunch of examples like that. But the bottom line is that the way our system is now, whatever it is that we need to eat that thing. Right? So to build this body, that's why we always say animal meats are so powerful, because if I eat something that resembles this body because of how my digestive system works, I give my body what I need to make this body. So any questions, comments with this summary of,
Well, the
Yes.
digestive. So mainstream, they say meat like sits in your stomach or sits in your colon. So like I've heard that over the years.
Yeah.
That's been, where'd that come from? What's that? Is
I don't know,
true?
man. So I want to do a whole talk on all the different conventional wisdom used on meat. Like we could do a talk on heart health, cancer, that issue. I was a vegan for 2 years, and during that 2 years, I was getting colonics every week because I was convinced about this whole caking on the inside of the colon or something like that. It's actually protective to have like this, whatever they call it. It's almost like its own little microbiome. But it looks dirty, but it's actually not. It's beneficial, but I don't know, man. There's been all kinds of arguments that come out against meat.
Why do they say meat, like red meat, give you a heart attack?
Well, so in the early 1930s, 40s, there was this almost like a revolution against fat meat because we had a lot of heart disease, and it's a long talk in and of itself. But basically, there was an agenda to move people away from eating meat and fat because they thought that fat was the problem. There was some flawed research and flawed studies that a lot of people took to heart and then put out, and we've been following that ever since. And the reality is that it's completely wrong. And we see it in the population. Everyone's trying to do all these different crazy things. And
People didn't get healthier.
they didn't get healthier.
Yeah,
We're the
fat
worst that
was-
we've ever been. We're the worst that we've ever been, and we're eating less fat meat because of all that propagated advice that's been completely wrong.
I feel like we're the worst that humans are.
we are. We're devolving. We're degenerating,
Not just
for sure.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
Now we have a chance to turn it around,
Right.
doing what we're doing, and then passing that wisdom on to other people.
I think the fat for fuel thing though has kind of caught on lately.
Huge.
From what
Like-
I've seen.
Well, it's really interesting because, yes, so Nicole says the fat for fuel and just meat in general, right? We have the keto movement, we have the paleo movement, we have the low carbers. So there's a
What's
lot
more
of
recent?
grassroots traction. But at the same time, if you just walk into a normal grocery store, the other end of the spectrum is still getting worse. So it's like you have more of us, more proof, and then things are still devolving, right? But what's really cool is that we have these thought leaders that are like prominent, like doctors and researchers that are now having a voice through podcasts, through books and things like that. The evidence is so clear, it's ridiculous. Right? Cool. Anything else? 'Cause I want us to understand and believe this stuff. Right? I have no agenda. I want to make you guys feel good. That's it. Well, I guess I do have an agenda. That's the agenda. All right, so some really good books I'll send out some links to if you haven't read these before. Ancestral Appetites was written by a local anthropologist, which I've had a chance to sit down and talk to. She's really cool. Yeah. So Nutrition and Physical Degeneration by Dr. Price. The Vegetarian Myth is I've read that like at least 3-4 times. It's awesome. Catching Fire is a compilation of anthropological studies just discussing this whole control of fire and how it impacted our evolution. So really, really good stuff. And then I'll send out a follow-up email too, Ben, with links and stuff.
Oh.
Really, really good books. No, I mean, you can take pictures too. And the recorded version of this we'll send out. All right. So just a few other things. We've seen this in some of our other talks, but I think it's useful information to see. What are porpoise? Anybody know?
I wouldn't have known it.
It's like cat litter.
Yeah, it's human feces. So there's human feces that we found that is all the way up to 300,000 years old to 50,000 years, because after 50,000 years, we're here modern, right? No evidence of plant matter whatsoever in any feces. Right? If we look at the archaeological record, we'll see stone tools, arrows, hunting tools. Obvious that humans are flexible carnivores. Like they ate a lot of meat, but also they could eat plant matter. Right? If we look at traditional human populations that we've studied, we see the same thing. Like humans are usually documented. Actually, meat tends to be the priority with a lot of these populations, but they do fall back to plant matter when they have access to it or they need to. And then if we look at early historical records from explorers, we would see the same thing. Humans were documented as eating meat. Meat tended to be the priority. Sometimes you saw some populations that were completely carnivorous. They were all extremely healthy. All right, and then modern hunter-gatherer populations. This is pulled from a presentation from Dr. Lauren Cordain. And so there's about 229 tribes that have been studied just to see how much animal foods compared to plant foods they consume. And what we found is that the majority of them have a pretty decent balance. So this is percentage dependence on animal foods. This is the percentage down here. So this means 45 tribes got 56 to 65% of their daily caloric intake from animal foods, which means the rest were plant foods. If we look down here, we had 0 that were vegan. We had a couple that were really, really high plant matter, but they did end up eating some insects and some things throughout the year. And then we have over here some that were completely carnivores, but the majority of them had a pretty good balance of meat to plants. So summarizing all that archaeology, traditional populations, explorer records, and then even when we study modern hunter-gatherer populations, we see that humans do eat meat. They tend to prefer the meat and fat, and plants tend to be like this fallback food, really. So in summary, our ancestors sought out nutrients, and they also sought out things that were really easy to use for energy, which tended to be very seasonal for a lot of them, right? Fruits and things. Honey, with some dangers, some bees. I don't know if you guys were part of the nutritional vitality talk that we did, but I thought it was a really, really good way to assess whether a food was healthy for us or not. We would assess foods based on whether it had a lot of nutrients, whether it had minimal toxicity, and if it contributed to the body's ability to use fat for fuel. So let's go through some examples here. The arguments for eating plants are nutrients, right? We get some beneficial nutrients from plants. Things like fiber, polyphenols, antioxidants, and we do see people getting better from eating plants, right? So let's unpack a couple of these things. Why do people get better when they eat plants?
I just think the standard American diet is so bad. If you do anything else, so bad.
Thank you. That's it. So if I go from eating processed food and Pop-Tarts and Hot Pockets to eating something that's plant-based, of course things are going to improve. But it's not because I'm not eating meat. It's because I'm not eating crap, right? So it may be better, it would be better if someone actually went to an omnivorous or more carnivorous way of eating. Right? Shoot, man. Paul Saladino goes through such good arguments on some of these things. And actually our second talk
Cheetos has never had a recall. Just saying.
Cheetos has never had a recall. Kyle says Cheetos has never had a recall. All right. So next week, we're going to talk about specifics around antioxidants, polyphenols, and some of these things that are considered beneficial, but they're actually not very beneficial for humans. But if I look at a piece of broccoli, if I assess this based on nutritional vitality, so nutrients, does broccoli have a lot of beneficial nutrients? Actually, broccoli does not have a lot of beneficial nutrients. It has some things. It doesn't. I mean, when you analyze it,
I think it's good.
I know. Well, I'm not saying, so this is an experiment. So I'm not saying that this is the end all be all. I'm making an argument for us to do this experiment together. And then we can come out of this and do whatever the heck we want, really. But
And in 4 weeks, we'll say, oh, I can have broccoli.
yeah, I don't think that that's going to happen.
Nobody's ever said that.
Yeah, nobody's ever said.
Broccoli and
I'm-
sauteed in some coconut oil is the best.
I think it's better sauteed with butter.
Yeah, me too.
Covered in cheese.
I'll take a ribeye over that any
Yeah,
day.
exactly.
I'll eat it with the ribeye.
Yeah. But the reality is, like, you can pull up the nutrition data on whatever those different websites are, nutritiondata.com, right? And compare, like, ounce for ounce broccoli to meat. Broccoli does not have much nutrients at all. And then what we find is a lot of those nutrients are bound up in the fiber, and they're bound up by anti-nutrients. The plant is trying to hold on to those nutrients for its growing self and maybe some seeds or something, right? So, and again, like in some ways, it's almost like I wish this were not true, because I feel bad for all the people that believe that plants are so good for you. But this is the reality. We don't get much nutrients out of plants. And then toxicity-wise, we have a lot of anti-nutrients in plants. Phytic acid is what binds to minerals that keeps us from absorbing it. So even if I look at, say, broccoli, I got calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, like I don't get access to much of that because it's bound up in fiber, and then we have phytic acid that holds onto it, makes it very difficult for us to digest it and absorb it. We have things, has anyone ever heard of oxalates? I'm sensitive to oxalates. Oxalates are high in some plants. Spinach goes right through me every time I eat it, right? Goitrogens, a lot of the cruciferous vegetables actually mess with people's thyroids because it inhibits your ability to create your TSH and free TSH and all those other things. And then some things that Paul Saladino mentioned, sulforaphane, phytolexins are plant pesticides that some of us have been told are healthy for us, like polyphenols, but actually what we find is that they're actually the way that the plant wards off pests and insects and things. Now, if I look at a piece of steak, I get a lot of great nutrients. And again, if we do well on nutrient to nutrient assimilation, if a doctor is telling me, hey, your vitamin D levels are low, you need to take some vitamin D, well, then it also makes sense that if I want this animal, I need to consume this animal. So when I eat a piece of steak, I'm getting a full balance, a full spectrum of amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, fat-soluble nutrients, minerals, cofactors, life force, vitality. There is no toxicity in meat. Zero. Would anybody disagree with that?
If it's been bacon.
Cured.
Cured, yeah.
Cured is great, actually. Cured is traditional. So cured bacon, salami, prosciutto, it means it's been slightly fermented. So, but some people might say, what about hormones, antibiotics, things like that, right? The same argument goes for plants. I mean, we got pesticides, glyphosate, synthetic fertilizers. So there's a quality issue there for sure. But let's just take, theoretically, if this is a pristine cut of steak from a pristine animal, there is nothing toxic about this at all. There is nothing that my body sees as problematic in this piece of steak. At all. Nothing. Zero. It's perfect, right? And then, of course, it does help us contribute to fat burning because it doesn't have any sugar. Right? So, I don't know. We put together the spectrum talking about the best nutrients to the worst nutrients, all right? So let's just talk through this. Animal-based nutrients, again, because we do really well because of our digestive system on direct nutrient-to-nutrient assimilation, animal-based nutrients are very bioavailable, they're void of toxins, and they're easy for the body to access. Okay? Plant-based nutrients are not as bioavailable. They're packaged with toxins and things that inhibit us from absorbing them, and they're bound up in fibrous walls. So a lot of those nutrients we can't even access unless we break it down and maybe cook it or something like that. Energy. Ideally, we're using energy from our body fat stores, and maybe sometimes we're tapping into our muscle glycogen. Energy from animal fats, very, very easy for the body to use, plus animal fats are going to have fat-soluble nutrients like vitamin A and vitamin D and their derivatives. Plant-based fats like olive, coconut oil, avocado, they're fine, they're less exciting, and they don't have the nutrients that animal fats have. Plant glucose, very easy for us to use. Things like starches and fruits, relatively void of toxins, especially if you prepare the cassava root, potatoes, and sweet potatoes and things properly by cooking them. Whatever toxins are in there, we see a mitigation of most of that. But then plant glucose from grains and seeds and legumes are packaged with toxins, and we'd say that it's probably not the best thing to consume. So all I'm trying to show here is a spectrum of the best nutrients to the not so optimal nutrients, and the best way to get energy to the not so optimal way to get energy from a dietary perspective. Questions? Comments? Snide remarks? All right, let's keep going. So here's our problematic plant progression. This is based on Paul Saladino's work, Sean Baker's work, everything that I could get my hands on over the past couple of years, all right? This is pretty solid. So theoretically, the most problematic plants are going to be seeds, because seeds are protected. Seeds, a plant really does a really good job of trying to protect the seed because it's its offspring. This is where we see the most anti-nutrients. Also, nightshades. Most nightshades are completely poisonous to human beings. There's just some that actually we found to be tolerable or edible, but there's still some really problematic compounds in nightshades. And then grains, of course, are things that we don't consume anyway in our world. But this would be what we consider the worst plants to consume.
Is there
Theoretically.
something in seeds? Like I feel like I heard this before. That, like seeds have something in them that makes animals not want to eat them.
Sometimes, yeah, absolutely.
Because they're a seed, they like want to grow.
They want to grow, yeah. So a plant builds into seeds protection mechanism. This anti-nutrient. It discourages mammals from eating. Some mammals, like herbivores, have designed digestive systems that mitigate that through fermentation, through a digestive process. They can actually mitigate a lot of those anti-nutrients. But herbivores are interesting too. When you watch them, they don't eat the same thing all the time. They're moving around. They minimize their toxic load from specific plants. And then human beings, on the other hand, are eating like a shitload of broccoli or a shitload of spinach because they think it's healthy. We're not getting that diversification. But yeah, a lot of toxins in seeds.
Are those potatoes up there?
No, where?
On the
Oh yeah, nightshade potatoes are nightshades. Yeah. I know. Now, not sweet potatoes. Those
Okay.
are different. That's a different variety of plant. So, what we consider the things that are okay to experiment with, relatively safe, would be non-sweet fruits. Why do we specify non-sweet fruits? The sugar part of it, yeah. The sugar's relatively toxic to human beings, right? And then our safe starches minus the potatoes, because potatoes are nightshades. Squashes are extremely safe as long as you don't eat the skin or the seeds. And then in the middle, we have our hearty vegetables and our sweet fruits. And I would say in between the middle and the problematic side, we've got things like hard-shelled nuts, because hard-shelled nuts are the safest of the seeds, but still in the carnivore world, all seeds are kind of off limits or forbidden, highly discouraged. So the best things to consume in the plant-based world is going to be here. If I wanted to throw one other thing, I could say maybe soft greens, right? But it depends on the greens. Like lettuce, pretty benign, but then spinach has a lot of oxalates and other anti-nutrients. So there's certain greens that are okay and certain greens that aren't. Right? Fibrous vegetables, I'd say if I was dead set on eating something like this, if I cooked it, I would mitigate some of the anti-nutrients. So the more fibrous, the more beneficial it would be from cooking. Sweet fruits are in this kind of middle area because of the sugar content. So what's ideal is what we see right here.
What about an onion?
Ooh, onion? I don't know, man. Figure out what that would. So that might be considered more like a root vegetable. So root vegetables also include like carrots and parsnips and things. So I need to look that up. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know where onions fall into the progression, y'all. All right. And any other specific plants you got questions on, let me know because I can look it up. Maybe not just in this moment, but as we go through the next 4 weeks. All right. And then I was just mentioning our spectrum of seeds. So not all seeds are created equal. In the seed realm, we have grains, which we consider to be the most toxic because when we eat grains, we're typically eating the shell, which is where a lot of the toxins are. On the safe side, we have hard-shelled nuts, or the safer side, hard-shelled nuts and white rice, because it's been stripped of the shell, and that's where a lot of the protection is. We have legumes in the middle, or beans, and if we make those properly by soaking them overnight and doing some other things, then we can make those more nutritious. But again, on this progression, that progression falls right here. We'd say that for this progression, seeds are probably best avoided, right? Cool. So this is our flexible animal-based food pyramid. Now we'll send out a PDF, black and white version that you can print out. Really easy to see. Okay. So the bottom of the pyramid, ideally you're making your priority animal meats, bone-in, fatty cuts, skin on, and then some of the superfoods, some really good fats. We throw in some avocados and olive oil as something that you can use long-term. For the duration of this progression, we'll have our own basic oil each week. We're big fans of superfoods. That includes a lot of the organ meats and bone marrow and bone stock, and then also cod liver oil and honey. I'll consider honey a superfood, it's animal-based. And then to make this a flexible, something that we can live with for a lifetime, we've got these less toxic plants like soft greens, spices, and herbs, our safe starches, root vegetables, squashes, and fruits. And then for indulgence, and to make this work in a modern lifestyle, we're okay with things like heavy cream, full fat cheeses, cooked veggies, coffee, tea, and alcohol. Right? This is our food pyramid going forward.
So are eggs not in here?
Eggs are in the meat. Yeah, eggs
Oh,
would be
they are.
perfectly fine. Yeah, absolutely.
Soft greens, that's just cooked greens.
No, it could be soft like lettuce or like spring greens or something like that. But I'm going to put together like this little summary of the best greens versus the worst greens, because I'd say spinach is one of the worst. Kale's probably one of the worst too, even though everybody thinks it's healthy.
Because it doesn't taste good.
And it doesn't taste good. None of those
Yeah.
things taste good.
Anything
by
that doesn't
themselves.
taste good is healthy.
All right, so the idea that I want us to get our minds around is for the purpose of an experiment. Again, right? We're just doing this to experiment. Then when we come out of it, we can do whatever we want. The priority needs to be the base of this food pyramid. And when I say priority, what we do is when we sit down, the first thing that we eat is usually the things in this bottom of the pyramid, and then if we have any appetite after that, maybe we'll add in some other stuff. Right? So our goals for this 1 week until next Saturday is going to be animal meats and fats are the priority. So animal meats and fats are the primary focus, meaning that's what you want to start your meal with. And you want to eat as much of that as you want to until you're kind of full. And then you can throw in some ancillary stuff afterwards. I would highly recommend that you consciously add a little bit of fat to every one of your meals, because if we're pulling back on all the plants and the glucose and the starches, we want this alternate fuel source. And I found that a lot of people, when I put my private clients go through it, if they just do a lot of meat, but they're not conscious of adding fat, something happens with their energy levels, it crashes. But if they consciously add like a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of fat to most of their meals, then they kind of like perk up a little bit. So, and even Paul Saladino recommends having some added fat with your meat. And then
Are you
approved
just
plants.
talking like throwing a chunk of butter on top of the steak?
Yeah,
Add fat
yeah,
to it?
yeah. Or making sure that you're cooking with butter or something.
What if you're eating like fat heavy?
Still add a little bit of fat.
Deep-
I would recommend. Now, if it's
Deep
super
fried
fatty,
pork.
then it's not as necessary. But it just what I see with a lot of my clients is they eat a lot of like eggs and steaks and things that seem to be a little bit leaner. You know what I mean? It's not super
Right,
fatty.
like
Like if you're doing a pork belly,
I
that's
do
a
like
lot of
chuck
fat.
roast, and it's just like it's fat. Like if you cook it, you get like this much fat.
Yeah.
Like a chuck roast?
Well, a lot of that fat you're probably not consuming, or a lot of people don't consume because they pour it out, or just like it's left behind in the whatever they cooked it in, right?
No, I eat it.
So yeah, okay, good. All right. Well, if you're eating that fat, then I think the takeaway is we want to make sure that we're balancing meat with fat. We're not just getting a lot of protein. Right? And then approved plants secondary. So for plants, for this first week, so we're going to transition ourselves easy into this whole animal-based progression. By the third week, I want us all to try to go 1 week completely animal-based, no plants whatsoever. All right. So to do that, for the first week, we are doing no hearty vegetables. That means no broccoli, no cauliflower, no asparagus, no really tough fiber stuff. No nightshades, no nuts or seeds. We can have high-fat produce like avocados, olives, and coconuts. We can do some soft greens that don't require cooking, but you can cook them, right? So things like spring greens, lettuce. We can even put spinach and stuff in there for right now, right? But it's soft. We can do carbohydrates, our safe starches and fruits, minus the potatoes because they're nightshades. We can do spices, seasoned herbs. And if you want to see what's available here locally, theoretically, even though there's not a lot of farmers here, seasonalfoodguide.org pulls up your location. It tells you what's in season here in Nevada. It's pretty cool based on the time you're in the room right now. All right. And then for superfoods focus, if you had a little extra energy that you could put into something, I would say try to make bone stock a part of your daily ritual somehow, but definitely adding some collagen into your daily routine. All right, so we usually do a cup of bone stock every day. I put a couple of scoops of collagen in the bone stock. I put a scoop of collagen with most of my drinks, 2 scoops before I go to bed. So I'm probably getting like 8 to 10 scoops of collagen a day. I don't think you can overdose on that stuff. All right.
So what is collagen?
So if you had 100% of the protein in the body, right? Out of that 100% of the protein in your body, 33% plus is collagen matrix based. And we don't eat a lot of collagen. So most of us are eating steaks, eggs, chicken, not us, hopefully, but chicken breasts and things like that, right? Collagen is usually in the skin and the connective tissue and the ligaments and bones and joints. So most of us are not eating a lot of that. So we recommend supplementing with collagen. Yep. Oh, to look at that. So yeah, Mindy, I'll send out a PDF of all this stuff and the presentation and slides too. But give me till tomorrow afternoon to get that out to y'all. Okay. All right. So
Peppers like jalapenos. So
nightshades.
spicy stuff.
Nightshades. Yep. So really, really good question. Arnica is addicted to freaking sriracha sauce and this little mixture of sriracha and ketchup. Like it's like her little dipping thing, which I love it too. But it's nightshades. It's tomatoes, it's peppers, right? So that's going to be a difficult transition for us. Sweet potatoes are fine. So sweet potatoes are in our safe starches. There's a difference between sweet potatoes and potatoes, which might otherwise be known as white potatoes, right? So white potatoes are nightshades. Sweet potatoes and ancestral tubers like yams and the taro root cassava are not nightshades, right? So they're fine. Good question. Anything else? All right, and I think, for liquids, clean water, sparkling water is great, Topo Chico, Pellegrino, coffee, tea, LaCroix, Zevia, and then one alcoholic drink per evening if you want to.
Save them up.
So
Can we
I was just going to say,
Bomb at the end of the month.
yeah, so Ryan asked, can we save them and just drink them all in one day? That's kind of what we do. So, yeah. Yeah, we try not to drink during the week, but see now my schedule's all off because Arnica's got a Wednesday off, so I drink with her on Wednesday, and then we get to Friday and it's like, oh, Friday I want to have a drink, and then Saturday and Sunday. All right, so that is what we got. So let me just summarize, and that was oh cool, that was less than an hour. Awesome. So we will always advocate balance with the SHT, especially for new people. Those of us that have transitioned to this experiment have stayed with it ever since. The argument that we're trying to make today is that we do really well on direct nutrient-to-nutrient assimilation because our digestive systems are different. We evolved bigger brains, smaller guts because of the introduction of animal meats and calorically dense fats and things, right? And we're trying to tap into what our physiology is actually made for. And we don't believe, if I'm trying to eat food to give my body the maximum nutrients and to train my body how to use fat for fuel, it's like bang for buck, meat is so much more valuable than a piece of broccoli. That's just the way it is. All right, so that's the experiment for the next week. And then hopefully y'all can get together again next Saturday at 10:30. We'll do the same thing, we'll just take it up another notch, all right? Questions, comments, concerns?
Are you still doing the